Okay, Matt. So I'm going to show you how to make my pinto beans that I make from scratch. So these were dried. There's 2 cups here dried, and I rinsed them 3 times. So I put them in this bowl right here, and I covered them in the hottest water I could get in my sink from my tap, and I rinsed them very well 3 times. So now I have them in this sieve, this strainer, and I usually just run some cold water from my tap over them and get them, rinsed off. Just make sure I'm rinsing them off. I know this seems redundant, but I just like to make sure that the beans are nice and clean. So I know like an ounce of prevention, right, is like a pound of cure, or I don't know. Anyway, so I usually rinse them the very last time with cold water. And then at this point, after I've finished rinsing them, I'm going to put them in my big stainless steel pot that I cook my beans in. And then I'll show you what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to pause this, and then I will go back to, I'll get back to you just in a minute. Okay, so now I'm putting cold water over the top of my beans. I'm not going to season them yet because this is the part that sort of takes the place of soaking them overnight. So I put cold water. I always start them from cold water. And I put quite a bit of water in there. I probably fill the pan, this big, large pan, half full. And then I set it on the stove, and I get them to a rolling boil, and I set my timer for 15 minutes. Once they begin to boil, I'll set my timer for 15 minutes, and I'll let them boil for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to rinse them again. I'm not going to rinse them. I'm going to put new water in them. I'm going to do this step 3 times. It works really well. I've been doing it for years, and it makes for a good pot of beans. So I'll get right back to you on that once I get them on the stove. Okay, so I'm going to turn them. I'm going to put them on high. Okay, and I'm going to bring them to a boil. Once they turn to a boil, I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to let them go for 15 minutes. I'm just going to let them boil, which is why I filled the pan half full of water, so that the water's not boiling away. So once I'm done with that, I'll show you what I do next. So you can see that they are getting close to boiling, and they're going to rise to the top, and they're going to do their little floaty thing, and then we're going to let them boil for 15 minutes. They're getting very close. So yeah, so this will be the first 15-minute cycle. So now they're coming to a boil, and my phone's gonna probably fog up. Sorry. So now we're gonna set the timer for 15 minutes, and we're just gonna let that go, and we're gonna let it boil for 15 minutes. And this is just clear water. There's no seasonings, just clear water. Okay, so I rinsed them. So they boiled for 15 minutes, and I rinsed them. I drained them, I rinsed them, and I put them back in another pot of cold water. So always start with cold water, okay? And then I'm going to bring this back up to a boil again for another 15 minutes. This is the second cycle. This is 2 of 3, okay? Okay, so it is now getting ready to boil for a second time. And I'm going to set my timer for 15 more minutes. And as soon as it begins to boil, I'm going to Set that timer and let it go for another 15 minutes. But you can see that the water is beginning to get kind of foamy. And that's going to happen. That's just going to happen. That's part of the whole, sorry about the TV behind me. Anyway, it's better to just do this 3 times. So that's going to happen. The foam is going to happen. So don't worry about the foam. Okay, so the second 15-minute timer has gone off, and now you can see that the beans are really starting to release a lot of foam. And so the next one should a little bit, but not like this, okay? So I'm getting ready to rinse the beans. There's a lot of stuff around the pot, and I'll wash all that off before I put new water back in. But you can see that they're starting to expand. It's hard to hold the phone and do this at the same time. But the water's brown and the beans are starting to expand, get a little softer. So I'm gonna rinse them again in cold water, put fresh cold water back in the pot, and this will be our third 15-minute boil. So as you can see, they've expanded quite a bit just from those first 2 15-minute boils, and they're beginning to get they're getting softer. Like you can mash them with your fingers, but they're not done. So they're still going to require a lot of cooking time. So I just wanted to show you that. My hands are clean. I washed them before I put my hands down in there. So I'm going to fill them with cold water again. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Fill them half full, cold water. Okay, one down in the bottom of the sink. So you fill them half full of cold water, and then you're going to boil them again for another 15 minutes. And then after that, I will drain off that water. We're going to add brand new water for our cooking water now. So this is the last 15-minute cycle. And then we will start the actual cooking process. Does that make sense? Okay, now we're back on the stove again for another 15-minute boil. And then I'll show you what we do next. Okay, so I was wrong. There is some foam, but not to the extent of the last boil. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to do it. It's okay. It's not anything bad. I know that some people might freak out, but you cook, so you know what's going on. So we are about almost 2 minutes into our third 15-minute boil. Okay, so we are now done with our third pre-cook, like our boil. So I'm going to rinse these again with cold water and put new water back in the pot. And now we're going to start the cooking process. Okay, so now that we're going to begin the cooking process, I wanted to show you what I put in mine. And everybody's different, so I'm sure you'll probably do yours different. We've talked about that before. But I put 3 large cloves of garlic in mine. I'm going to turn it on to high again because we're going to bring it back up to a boil. Let it boil for a few minutes and then bring it down to medium heat and just let it cook. Okay, so I've turned on my heat to high. Okay, now I have seasoning salt. I've got granulated onion powder. I've got freeze-dried onions, and then I've got garlic powder. And I'm going to put that in all at the same time. And then I'm going to add some of the chicken better than bouillon because I really like it. And I usually do like a big old fat dollop, like, you know, about that much. I love this stuff. So I put it in my beans almost every single time. I mean, sometimes I get a wild hair, but I really like this stuff, so I'm going to put this in. And I'm going to stir it in. It just kind of stirs in. I love this stuff. I know you introduced this to me, so yeah, I stirred it in. And so later you can kind of taste your water, the juice, and see if it needs something. But I try to season. I try to season it pretty much during the cooking process. Like I said, we are going to add all of our seasonings to it, bring it up to a boil, and let it go for 10 minutes or so, and then lower it. And I'm also going to add some, some avocado oil. I always add a little bit of oil to my cooking water when I'm doing beans, because I think it's just really, it makes the juice kind of really silky flavored, and it does kind of help the beans along. I mean, I feel like it's a good addition. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I just put it over the top. I just kind of go like, I just do it kind of around like this. It doesn't take much. That's probably like a couple of tablespoons, not a lot. So again, we're going to bring this up to a boil, and then we're going to let it go for a few minutes and then lower it. At that point, I'm going to cover it and let it cook for a while. Now, if it starts to boil over, you can sort of loosen the lid a little bit, set the lid kind of offset, and so that it doesn't boil over. That's a mess, and you don't want that to happen. Just make sure you're stirring it. You'll notice that your beans are pretty soft at this point. So you've done quite a lot of the cooking process during your, what you would call your pre-soak, like your, it's instead of letting them sit overnight, this is what you would do. I know that there's going to be people on this video, because I'm sure people are going to see this video and they're going to say, you didn't need to do that, or why didn't you just cook it 45 minutes through and then change the water? Because that's how I do it. That's how I've done it for a long time, and that's how I'm going to continue to do it, and it works every single time. So anyway, we're going to bring it back up to a boil, like I said, and then we're going to lower the heat and let it cook. Okay, as you can see, they're boiling again. I know this is like a long process. This isn't something that you can just decide you're going to cook at 4 in the afternoon and have ready for dinner at 7. It's just not one of those things. So right now we are already at like an hour, almost an hour cooking. So anyway, they're boiling, and again I'm going to let them go for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to lower the heat. So now we've started the cooking process. So they will be on the heat, until they're done. And the thing about beans is that it's like you can't just go like, oh, they'll be done in 2 hours or whatever. Every elevation is different. So, you just have to test them. So, I mean, I can't really stand here and tell you that I know exactly how long it's gonna take. But we will check them throughout the process to see how they're doing. And I will show you when they're done. One more thing. Usually I have an entire onion that I cut in half. I just take the skin off, cut it in half, and I throw it in the pot at this point instead of the dehydrated onions, but I didn't have that today, and I didn't want to go out to the store. So I use dehydrated onions, which are just fine, but usually I will just let an entire onion cook in the beans, the entire process, and it pretty much just disintegrates during the process. So I mean, if you wanted to use an entire onion, it's so tasty. I love it that way. But I just didn't have it. But that is something that you can do. Okay, so I've now turned it down to like medium low. Yeah. Okay, and we're going to let that go. We're going to let it kind of calm down a little bit. And then we're going to put this lid on. And I usually set the lid like this. I just kind of, it's just offset some. Okay, so we're going to let that go. I'm going to set my timer for about 45 minutes. And at that point, I'm going to come back and I'm going to see if we need to add more water. We're going to stir them, check them out, see where they're at. So I'll see you in 45 minutes.